Please, sir, be my dad just for one day. It is my birthday." The words floated through the morning air like a quiet prayer. The city had not yet woken fully. Only the distant sound of car tires and the soft rustle of leaves filled the silence. On a wooden bench outside a coffee shop, a man in a black suit lowered his newspaper. His name was Charles Denham, Chief Executive Officer of Denham Group, a man whose life was measured in contracts, deadlines, and unreturned phone calls. Yet the voice of that little girl made him forget everything for a moment. She stood in front of him, no taller than his waist, her pink dress smudged with dirt, her shoes uneven and worn. Her small hands clutched a paper bracelet, its edges torn, the crayon letters spelling, "Happy Birthday, Dad." The morning light caught the shimmer of her tears before she quickly blinked them away. Charles cleared his throat, unsure if he had heard her correctly. "What did you say?" he asked softly. The girl lifted her chin, her voice trembling but determined. "I said, please, sir, just for one day. You do not have to buy me anything. I only want to know what it feels like to have a dad." The newspaper slid from his fingers and landed on the pavement. The sound was small, but it echoed through the empty street like thunder. For a man who negotiated empires, he suddenly found himself unable to form a single word. He looked at her, really looked at her. Her hair was neatly braided despite the dust on her dress. Her eyes held no fear, only hope. Hope so fragile it could break if he looked away too quickly. "Where is your father?" he managed to ask. She shook her head slowly. "My mom says he is gone. But I dreamed last night that he was here, reading a newspaper, waiting for me." Something in his chest tightened. A dream, a bench, a man with a newspaper. The coincidence made his pulse slow, then quicken again. He searched her face for a sign that this was some misunderstanding, but the truth shimmered there in her eyes, pure, uncalculated, and painfully real. A breeze lifted the fallen pages of his paper, scattering them across the stone walkway. The girl bent down and gathered them one by one, her tiny fingers smoothing each sheet before handing them back. "Thank you," Charles murmured. She smiled faintly. "You looked like you needed someone to talk to." He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that he was fine, that powerful men did not need anyone, but the words would not come. The golden light of morning glowed on her paper bracelet, and for the first time in years, Charles Denham felt something stir inside him that no success had ever given him, something he had not felt since the day he lost what could have been family. Charles Denham sat frozen on the bench, his hands still resting on the folded newspaper. The air seemed heavier now, as if the simple request of a child had drawn a curtain between the world he knew and one he had forgotten. The little girl stood quietly before him, her eyes hopeful, yet uncertain. A single leaf drifted down from the tree above them, landing near her shoe. She stared at it for a moment, then looked back at him with quiet courage. He forced a faint smile, the kind he used in boardrooms to soften unpleasant truths. "That is a very kind thing to say," he began slowly, his voice controlled and polite. "But I am afraid I cannot be your father, not even for a day. You must understand, little one, people might think it strange." Her small shoulders stiffened, but she did not look away. "I did not mean to make you sad, sir. I just thought maybe you were someone who could smile at me today." Charles swallowed hard. The words were simple, but they landed like a blow. He looked at her again, more carefully this time. Her face was thin but not sickly. Her hair was braided with the kind of care only a loving hand could manage. She did not look abandoned. She looked hopeful. That was somehow harder to face. A waiter from the nearby cafe stepped outside, holding a cup of coffee. "Good morning, Mr. Denham," he said cheerfully. "Your usual?" Charles nodded, grateful for the distraction. The man placed the cup on the table beside him, but his eyes drifted toward the girl. "Is everything all right, sir?" Charles hesitated. "Yes, she was just leaving." The girl blinked, her small fingers tightening around the paper bracelet. "I am sorry, sir. I did not mean to bother you." Her voice broke slightly at the end, not from fear, but from disappointment. She turned to walk away, the strap of her small bag slipping from her shoulder. The waiter looked uncomfortable. "Kids from the shelter have been coming around more often," he murmured, lowering his voice. "They ask for spare change or leftover muffins. I can ask her to leave if you want." Charles felt an unexpected flash of irritation. "No," he said sharply, louder than intended. The waiter stepped back, startled. Charles lowered his voice again. "That will not be necessary." The girl had stopped at the corner of the street. She looked back once, the sunlight catching the faint shimmer of tears in her eyes. Charles exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of his own reaction pressing down on him. "Bring her a muffin," he said quietly. "And some milk." The waiter nodded and hurried inside. Charles picked up the newspaper, but the words blurred. The headlines about markets, mergers, and profits meant nothing. He looked at the child again as she waited politely by the corner. When the waiter returned with the muffin and a small carton of milk, Charles walked over himself. "Here," he said gently, kneeling slightly so his eyes met hers. "You must be hungry." She hesitated, as if pride and need were fighting inside her. Then she accepted the food with both hands. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. "I promise I will not ask again. I just wanted today to be nice." Charles studied her face as she spoke. Something about her manner, the way she said, "Sir," the careful politeness stirred an ache he could not name. "How old are you?" he asked. 7, she said. "Mama says I turned 7 this morning. We were going to make pancakes, but she had to go to work early. She cleans offices downtown. I waited, but she did not come back yet." 7. The word echoed in his mind. His throat tightened. "You came here alone?" She nodded, chewing slowly. "We live just a few streets away. I saw you here every morning when I walked by. I thought maybe you were the man from my dream." Charles looked down. "And what did your dream tell you?" "That my dad was not gone forever," she said simply. "That he just forgot how to come home." The sentence stole the air from his lungs. He could not find a reply. The child looked at him with such gentle certainty that he could not meet her gaze for long. When she finished eating, she folded the muffin wrapper neatly and tucked it into her bag. "I should go," she said softly. "Mama says not to talk too long with strangers, but thank you for being kind." She turned again, her paper bracelet flashing in the light. Charles watched her small figure move toward the corner, the rhythm of her steps steady, careful, older than her years. Something inside him rebelled at the thought of letting her vanish into the noise of the city. "Wait," he called out. She stopped, startled, and looked back. He walked toward her slowly. "You said your mother cleans offices downtown." "Which one?" "Taylor Building, I think," she said. "The one with the shiny doors." He knew it. His company owned half that building. "What is your name?" he asked. "Anna," she said. "Anna Rivers." The name felt strange on his tongue. He whispered it again, softly, as if testing the sound. "Anna." She smiled faintly. "That is what Mama calls me when she is happy." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The city around them hummed back to life. A bus passed, a horn sounded in the distance, and the spell seemed to break. "Be careful getting home, Anna," Charles said at last, "and tell your mother that she has a brave daughter." Anna nodded. "You are nice, sir. You just look lonely." Then she turned the corner and disappeared into the crowd. Charles stood there long after she was gone, holding the untouched coffee in his hand. Her words replayed in his mind again and again. "You just look lonely." He looked down at his reflection in the coffee's dark surface and realized, for the first time in years, that she was right. That night, Charles Denham could not sleep. The lights of the city painted faint gold lines across the tall windows of his penthouse. But his eyes were fixed on the darkness between them. The echo of the little girl's voice had followed him home. It had threaded through the noise of his driver, the silence of the elevator, even the quiet hum of the refrigerator. "Please, sir, be my dad just for one day. It is my birthday." He had heard millions of sentences in his life, but none had stayed like this. He poured himself a glass of water and walked to the window. Below him, the streets stretched in perfect order, filled with the movement of people he would never know. Somewhere down there, a child named Anna Rivers had walked home alone through the same cold air that now pressed against the glass. He told himself it was not his concern. He had no right to involve himself in strangers' lives. Yet every time he closed his eyes, he saw that paper bracelet with its uneven words, "Happy birthday, Dad." And the way her voice trembled with both hope and certainty. By morning, his mind had decided something before his logic could stop it. He asked his driver to take a different route to the office. one that passed near the old district where the cleaning workers lived. The car rolled through narrow streets, past laundromats, bakeries, and cracked sidewalks. The difference between his world and hers grew sharper with every block. At a small corner store, he saw her. Anna stood near the entrance, holding a paper bag, her face bright with effort as she tried to push open the heavy door while keeping the bag steady. Charles felt his heart lurch before he even realized he had stepped out of the car. The driver called after him, but he waved it off. "Anna," he said gently. She looked up, startled, and for a moment her expression flickered between disbelief and joy. "Mr. Denham, you came back." He nodded, almost embarrassed. "I was in the area. I thought I should see if you and your mother were all right." Her face softened. "Mama is better today. She says thank you for the milk and muffin. I told her a kind man gave it to me." He smiled faintly. "You remembered my name." She grinned. "I do not forget nice people." He knelt slightly so that he was at her height. "Do you come here every morning?" She nodded. "I help Mr. Garcia carry the boxes sometimes. He gives me $1 if I am careful. I am saving for new shoes." She looked down at the scuffed ones she wore, then added proudly, "I already have $4. Charles felt a warmth he had not known in years. "That is very good," he said sincerely. "You must be very helpful." She shrugged, her small shoulders lifting. "Mama says hard work keeps the heart clean." He was quiet for a moment, studying her face again. "Would your mother mind if I said hello to her?" Anna hesitated. "She gets shy around rich people. She thinks they look down on her." "I do not," he said softly. "I just want to thank her for raising such a brave little girl." Anna looked thoughtful. "Maybe after she finishes her night job. She gets tired. But you can come by the building. We live behind the laundry with the blue sign." He nodded slowly. "I will remember that." When he stood again, she reached into her paper bag and pulled out a small piece of chocolate wrapped in foil. "You can have this," she said. "It is not much, but Mama says we should share good things." He tried to refuse, but the look on her face was too earnest. He accepted the candy and placed it carefully in his pocket. "Thank you, Anna. That means more than you know." She smiled brightly, then waved before disappearing into the shop. Back in the car, Charles sat in silence. The driver waited for instructions, but none came. He took out the piece of chocolate and turned it over in his fingers. The silver wrapper shone in the sunlight like a small mirror. For the first time in years, he saw his reflection not as a man of wealth, but as a man who had lost something essential and could not name it. At the office, the day unfolded as usual: meetings, calls, numbers, decisions. Yet through every discussion, he saw a little girl lifting a paper bag with determination, saving $1 at a time. When his assistant placed a file on his desk marked Taylor Building Maintenance Contracts, his pulse quickened. That was where Anna's mother worked. He hesitated for a long time, then opened the file. A list of names appeared: cleaning staff, shift hours, wage notes. And there it was: Rivers, Amelia, night shift, floor 16. The name made his chest tighten. Amelia Rivers. He remembered her. Years ago, she had worked in the old headquarters, quiet, efficient, always kind. She had resigned suddenly, and no one ever explained why. He had not thought of her since until now. He leaned back in his chair, the pieces forming a picture that frightened him. Could it be possible? Could Anna be? He stopped himself before finishing the thought. It was too soon, too wild, too much like the sort of thing only fate would dare arrange. When the day ended, he sat alone in his office long after everyone had left. The city lights glowed outside, steady and indifferent. He reached into his pocket and unwrapped the small piece of chocolate. It had melted slightly, but he ate it anyway. It tasted sweet and bitter at once. Then, almost without thinking, he whispered the words that had haunted him since that morning. "Please, sir, be my dad just for one day." He said them slowly, as if testing how they felt in his own voice. And in that quiet room high above the city, Charles Denham finally admitted what his heart already knew: he was no longer sure where the line between kindness and destiny began. The next evening arrived colder than the one before. The wind carried the faint smell of rain, and the city lights flickered against the wet pavement. Charles Denham sat in the back seat of his car, the hum of the engine low and steady as he stared out through the fogged window. He had told his driver he needed to make one quick stop before heading home. The man said nothing, though his eyes in the rearview mirror betrayed curiosity. Charles had never asked to visit this part of town before. When the car stopped, Charles stepped out slowly. The air felt different here, heavy with laundry steam and the metallic tang of old pipes. Neon letters above a narrow storefront flickered in tired blue light. Rivers Laundry and Press. Behind the building, just as Anna had said, a dim alley led to a row of small rooms converted from storage units. The sound of dripping water echoed between the walls. He hesitated for a moment, adjusting his coat against the cold, before knocking gently on a half-open door. A faint voice answered, weary but kind. "Come in, if you are not selling anything." He pushed the door open. The small space was lit by a single lamp balanced on a crate. The floor was clean but uneven. Against one wall stood a thin bed covered with a neatly folded blanket. Near the stove, a woman sat hunched over a small sewing kit, her fingers trembling slightly as she worked. She looked up, startled when she saw him. "Mrs. Rivers?" he asked carefully. Her eyes widened. "Yes. Do I know you?" Charles took a step forward, his tone gentle. "My name is Charles Denham. I believe you work at the Taylor Building, floor 16. Recognition flickered in her face. "The owner," she whispered. "You are him." She straightened quickly, wiping her hands on her apron. "I am sorry, sir. If there has been a complaint, I will fix it. I promise I never leave early." "Oh," he shook his head. "There is no complaint. I came because I met your daughter." The woman froze, the needle slipping from her fingers. "Anna, did she do something wrong?" "No," he said quickly. "She did nothing wrong. She was kind. She spoke to me yesterday morning." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, but her voice trembled. "She talks too much to strangers. I keep telling her to be careful. She is just a child, and I cannot always watch her." Charles looked around the room. There were drawings taped to the wall, crayon pictures of a sun, a small house, and a tall man with a smile. In the corner stood a bucket of folded laundry and a child's jacket hanging to dry. The room smelled faintly of soap and warmth. "She told me it was her birthday," he said softly. Amelia Rivers nodded. 7 years old. "I wanted to bake her a cake, but the stove broke again. We made pancakes instead. She said it was the best birthday ever. I suppose it was because of you." He looked startled. "Because of me?" "She told me you gave her breakfast and spoke kindly. That is more than most people do. It meant something to her." He smiled faintly. "She is remarkable, very polite, very brave." The woman smiled too, though it faltered quickly. "She gets that from her father, I suppose, or at least from the memory of him." The name hung between them. Charles's chest tightened. "May I ask," he began slowly, "what happened to him?" She looked away. "We were young. He was different then, ambitious, proud. When I found out I was pregnant, he said he needed time to think. He never came back." Her voice cracked but did not break. "I do not tell Anna much. I just say her father is far away." He could not speak. His heart thudded painfully as he pieced the fragments together. Amelia Rivers. The same name that had once appeared on a work transfer request he had signed years ago. She had left without explanation. He remembered her quiet eyes, her calmness under pressure, her kindness that had gone unnoticed. "Mrs. Rivers," he said gently, "I am sorry for intruding. I only wanted to be sure you both were safe." She nodded. "We are fine. We manage." Then she hesitated. "If she spoke out of turn or embarrassed you, please do not hold it against her." "She did not embarrass me," he said quietly. "She reminded me of something important." Before Amelia could reply, the door opened slightly, and Anna stepped in, her hair damp from the drizzle outside. When she saw Charles, her eyes widened with surprise and delight. "You came," she said softly. He smiled. "I promised I would, did I not?" She ran forward and wrapped her small arms around her mother's waist. "Mama, this is him, the man from the bench. I told you he was real." Her mother touched her hair gently. "I see that now." Charles crouched to meet Anna's eyes. "I wanted to thank you again for the chocolate. It was the best gift I have had in a long time." Anna giggled. "It was just a candy." "Sometimes," he said, The small things are the most important. A moment of silence followed, filled only by the sound of rain outside. Then Amelia spoke softly, her voice warm but cautious. "We do not have much, but would you like some tea, Mr. Denham?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I would." She poured water into a chipped cup and handed it to him. The tea tasted simple and honest. He looked around again, the careful tidiness, the little signs of love, the life built quietly out of hardship. He felt a strange ache of admiration and guilt all at once. When he stood to leave, Anna walked him to the door. "Will I see you again?" she asked. He looked down at her, the dim light catching the hope in her eyes. "Yes, Anna," he said softly. "You will." As he stepped into the rain, he turned back once more. Through the half-open door, he saw Amelia kneel beside her daughter, their heads close together as they whispered and laughed. It was a picture of warmth he had not seen in years. And for the first time since he could remember, Charles Denham felt something stir that he had thought long gone, the quiet pull of belonging. The rain had not stopped through the night. It fell in steady lines across the tall windows of Charles Denham's office, blurring the city skyline into streaks of silver. He had arrived early, long before the staff, but his mind was still back in that narrow room behind the laundry shop. The image of Amelia Rivers pouring him tea and Anna curling against her mother's side had stayed with him like the echo of a forgotten song. He had told himself he would only check that they were safe, but what he saw instead had unsettled something deeper. He tried to focus on the paperwork in front of him, but the words blurred. Every time he blinked, he saw the cracked cup, the small drawings taped to the wall, and the warmth that simple space held. He had built skyscrapers and filled them with glass and marble, yet that tiny room had felt more alive than his entire empire. By noon, he gave up pretending to work. He pressed the intercom and called his assistant. "Marion," he said, keeping his tone casual, "find out if the Taylor building has any available apartments in the upper floors, something small but in good condition. I may need to offer it to one of our employees temporarily." "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice brisk. "Should I prepare a lease agreement?" "Not yet," he said. "Just make sure it is furnished and stocked with essentials." Quietly, he ended the call and leaned back, feeling both nervous and resolute. It was the first time in years he had acted on instinct instead of calculation. That evening, when the city's rush had begun to fade, he returned to the Rivers neighborhood. The rain had softened into mist, and lights glowed through the thin curtains of the laundry shop. Anna was outside, crouched near a puddle, drawing shapes with a stick. She looked up as he approached, her face lighting with recognition. "Mr. Denham," she said cheerfully. "I told Mama you would come back." He smiled. "I am glad you believed me." Ugh. She stood quickly and brushed her hands on her dress. "Mama said you are busy, but I told her important people can still visit." Charles chuckled softly. "I suppose that is true." Inside, Amelia looked surprised when he entered, though her expression was not unkind. "Mr. Denham, this is unexpected. I hope there has not been a problem." "Quite the opposite," he said. "I came with an offer. I have a small apartment in one of our buildings that is currently empty. I thought you and Anna might stay there for a while. It would be warmer and safer." Amelia froze, her sewing needle suspended in midair. "That is very kind, sir, but we could not possibly accept. We pay our rent here, even if it is small. We do not take charity." He nodded slowly. "I understand. But think of it as a temporary arrangement, not charity. The company often supports employees in difficult circumstances. It would give Anna more space to play, and you could rest properly." Amelia hesitated. "It sounds too generous." Anna looked from one to the other, her brow furrowed in concern. "Mama, maybe we could stay just for a little while. The roof leaks, remember? My shoes were wet last night." Amelia sighed softly, her resolve weakening at her daughter's earnest tone. "It is only for a short time, you said." "Yes," Charles replied, "until you are ready to move again." She gave a small nod. "All right, but we will keep paying what we can." He smiled gently. "Agreed." 2 days later, they moved into the modest apartment on the 15th floor of the Taylor building. The rooms were small but bright, the kitchen stocked with groceries, and the beds covered in clean linens. Anna ran from room to room, her laughter filling the space. "Mama, look, the window's open and you can see the park," she exclaimed, pressing her hands against the glass. Charles stood back, watching her spin in circles with pure joy. Amelia caught his gaze and smiled quietly. "You have no idea what this means to her," she said. He looked away, feeling an unfamiliar tightness in his chest. "It is nothing," he murmured. "Everyone deserves a safe place." Later that evening, when they were settled, Amelia invited him to stay for dinner. The meal was simple rice, vegetables, and a small piece of fish, but it felt like a feast. Anna insisted that he sit beside her. She spoke non-stop about her school, her friends, and how she wanted to learn to play the piano someday. Charles listened, smiling at her excitement. "You would be a wonderful musician," he said. "You have spirit." "Do you play?" she asked curiously. He hesitated. "I used to. My daughter liked to listen." Amelia looked up sharply, but he avoided her gaze. After dinner, he prepared to leave. Anna followed him to the door, holding out something in her palm, a small seashell painted with bright colors. "For you," she said. "It is our good luck shell. Mama says it keeps bad dreams away." He took it carefully. "Then I will keep it close." As he stepped into the hall, Amelia called after him, "Mr. Denham." He turned. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for the apartment, but for seeing us. Most people look right past us." He paused, then nodded. "You and your daughter deserve to be seen." When he returned to his car, he held the seashell in his hand. The faint scent of laundry soap lingered on it. He turned it over slowly, feeling its ridges press against his palm. In a world of numbers and noise, it was the first real thing he had held in a long time. That night, as the city lights blinked below his window, he placed the seashell on his desk beside the silver wrapper from Anna's chocolate. Two small tokens, fragile and ordinary, yet they felt heavier than any award or title he had ever received. For the first time, Charles Denham understood what it meant to give without expecting anything in return. The morning sun filtered softly through the tall windows of the apartment on the 15th floor. The light caught the thin curtains, turning them a pale gold. It was the first morning since Amelia and Anna had moved in, and for a few quiet moments, everything felt almost perfect. Amelia stood by the small stove, stirring oatmeal while humming an old song. The gentle sound of her voice mixed with the distant hum of city traffic far below. Anna sat at the kitchen table, legs swinging back and forth, drawing pictures on a piece of paper. She had drawn the building, her mother, and a tall man holding a cup of tea. Beneath the figures, she wrote, in her uneven letters, "The nice man who helped us." When Amelia turned off the stove, she glanced toward the door. "Eat up, sweetheart," she said. "We will thank Mr. Denham properly when we see him next time." Anna smiled brightly. "Can I make him a thank you card?" Amelia nodded. "That would be lovely." The morning continued peacefully until the telephone on the wall rang. Amelia wiped her hands and answered. "Hello?" The voice on the other end was polite but formal. "Mrs. Rivers? This is Marion from Denham Group. I am calling to confirm that your new apartment arrangement has been finalized. Mr. Denham requested that I check if everything is comfortable." Amelia hesitated. "It is more than comfortable. Please thank him for me." Marion smiled through the line. "He will be glad to hear that. Also, Mr. Denham will be traveling for a few days on business. He asked me to let you know he might not visit this week." "Oh," Amelia said softly. "Of course. Please tell him not to worry. We are fine here." When she hung up, Anna was watching her with wide eyes. "Is he gone?" "Only for a little while," Amelia said. "He has work to do." Anna frowned, tracing circles on her paper. "I hope he does not forget us." "May." Amelia walked over and touched her shoulder gently. "Good people do not forget." For the next few days, their life settled into a quiet rhythm. Amelia worked evening shifts, and Anna spent her mornings drawing or exploring the apartment's small balcony. The city stretched endlessly below, filled with sounds and motion. Sometimes she imagined she could see Mr. Denham's office tower far in the distance. On the fourth morning, Amelia left early for work, kissing Anna's forehead before she went. "Stay inside, love. I will be back by dinner." Anna nodded, holding her mother's scarf. "I will draw something for you." Hours passed. The sky turned from gray to blue to orange. When the clock on the wall struck 6, the apartment was still empty. Anna looked at the door, expecting the familiar click of the lock. It did not come. By 7, Her stomach began to twist with worry. She waited another hour before climbing onto the couch to watch the hallway through the small window. The corridor lights flickered once, then steadied. No footsteps came. Finally, unable to stay still, she pulled on her coat, tucked the seashell Mr. Denham had given back to her in her pocket, and quietly stepped outside. The elevator felt enormous and strange as it carried her down. She pressed the button for the lobby and clutched the railing the whole way. The doorman looked surprised when she appeared. "Hey there, young lady," he said kindly. "Where are you off to?" "My mom works downtown," she said. "She was supposed to be home. Maybe she is waiting for me." The man frowned slightly. "It is late, kiddo. You should not go alone." Anna stood a little straighter. "I am not scared." He hesitated, then sighed. "All right, but stay where people can see you." Outside, the city lights shimmered in puddles left by last night's rain. Anna walked carefully, keeping close to the buildings. She remembered the way to the laundry shop, then the bus stop where her mother usually came from. Every face she passed looked unfamiliar. Meanwhile, across town, Charles Denham sat in a quiet restaurant with 2 clients, though his mind was far away. He kept checking his phone, even though he did not know why. When the waiter poured him another cup of coffee, he caught a glimpse of the seashell charm tied to his keychain and felt a sudden tug in his chest. "Excuse me," he said to his clients, rising abruptly. "I need to take care of something urgent." He left the restaurant and called Marion. "Has anyone checked in on Mrs. Rivers?" "No, sir," she replied. "Should I send someone?" "No," he said quickly. "I will go myself." Within 30 minutes, he was back at the Taylor building. The doorman met him at the entrance, looking nervous. "Sir, the little girl from 15B went out about an hour ago. I told her to stay close, but she insisted." Charles felt the cold air hit his chest. "Which direction?" "She went toward the bus stop near Douglas Street." He did not wait for more. He ran. The rain had started again, light but steady. When he reached the corner, he spotted a small figure sitting on a bench near the stop, knees pulled to her chest, her head resting on her arms. "Anna," he called softly. She lifted her head, eyes wide and wet. "Mr. Denham?" He knelt beside her, breathing hard from the run. "What are you doing out here?" "I was waiting for Mama," she said, her voice shaking. "She did not come home." He took a slow breath, forcing calm. "She might have had to work late. You cannot stay out here in the cold. Come on, let us go back inside." She hesitated. "What if she comes here, and I am gone?" "She will come to you," he said gently, "but you need to be safe first." He extended his hand. She looked at it for a long moment, then placed her small palm in his. When they reached the apartment again, he made her warm milk and sat with her until she stopped trembling. The rain outside thickened, tapping softly against the windows. She leaned against his arm, half asleep, whispering, "Thank you for finding me." Charles looked down at her and felt something shift deep within him. "You are welcome, Anna," he said quietly. "You are safe now." As the storm moved across the city, the seashell charm on the table caught the lamplight, glowing faintly like a promise neither of them yet understood. The next morning began in a blur of gray clouds and silence. Charles Denham sat in the small living room of the apartment, watching as the city below stirred to life. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with the smell of wet concrete. Anna still slept on the couch, curled under a soft blanket. Her breathing was steady now, her hand loosely holding the small seashell that had become her charm against fear. He had spent most of the night awake, checking the clock every few minutes, waiting for Amelia to return, but she never came. By dawn, his worry had grown too heavy to ignore. He called Marion and asked her to reach the cleaning supervisors at the Taylor building. Within an hour, she called back. "Sir," she said carefully, "Mrs. Rivers was taken to St. Mark's Hospital last night. She fainted during her shift. They say she is stable but resting." Charles closed his eyes and took a slow breath. Relief came first, then guilt. "Thank you, Marion," he said quietly. "Send a car to the hospital. I will be there soon." He turned to the couch. Anna had begun to stir, her small fingers rubbing her eyes. "Good morning," she whispered sleepily. Then she saw his expression and sat up quickly. "Is Mama home?" He shook his head. "She is at the hospital. But she is going to be fine. She just got very tired." Anna's eyes filled with tears. Is she sick? Not very, he said gently. She just needs to rest for a few days. We will go see her right now, all right? She nodded, clutching the seashell tightly in her fist. At the hospital, the sterile smell of antiseptic filled the corridors. Nurses moved quietly from room to room. When they entered Amelia's room, Anna ran forward before Charles could stop her. "Mama," she cried softly. Amelia stirred, her face pale but calm. "Sweetheart," she whispered, opening her eyes. "You are here." Anna climbed onto the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the wires and tubes. "I was scared," she said, "but Mr. Denham found me. He stayed with me all night." Amelia's gaze shifted to Charles. Her voice was weak but steady. "Thank you for taking care of her. I owe you more than I can say." He shook his head. "You owe me nothing. You have already given her everything that matters." The nurse entered then, checking Amelia's vitals. She smiled kindly at Anna. "Your mother needs rest, dear. She will be better soon." Anna nodded, then looked back at her mother. "Can I stay with you?" Amelia brushed her cheek softly. "No, my love. You need to eat and sleep properly. Mr. Denham will look after you until I come home." Anna turned toward Charles, her eyes wide with question. "Can I?" He hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "Of course. You can stay with me as long as your mother needs." Amelia's expression softened with gratitude and worry. "I trust you," she said quietly. "Please keep her safe." "I promise," he replied. For the next few days, their world changed shape. Charles took Anna to his penthouse, a place too large for one man, and far too quiet until she arrived. Her laughter filled the empty rooms. She marveled at the tall windows and the shimmering city lights below. "It looks like stars fell on the ground," she said, pressing her face to the glass. He smiled. "That is one way to see it." She explored every corner, fascinated by the piano in the living room. "Do you play this?" she asked. "I used to," he said. "Play something now," she urged, climbing onto the nearby couch. He hesitated, then sat at the piano. His fingers rested on the keys for a moment before he began to play a simple tune, soft, hesitant, but warm. Anna listened quietly, swaying slightly. When he finished, she clapped her hands. "It is beautiful," she said. "It sounds like a story that ends happy." He looked at her and smiled faintly. "Maybe it does." Each day followed with small routines that felt new to him. He made breakfast, walked her to the small park across the street, and read stories at night before she fell asleep on the couch. For years, his life had been measured by meetings and numbers. Now, it was measured by the sound of a child's laughter and the way she said, "Good night," before drifting to dreams. But with the warmth came a deep unease. He had begun to feel something he could not name, a bond that felt too familiar, too strong. At first, he thought it was only affection for a kind child. Then, as he watched her draw one evening, the truth began to unfold quietly within him. The way she held her pencil, the slight tilt of her head when she concentrated, even the way she laughed, each detail mirrored someone from his past, someone he had lost before she was ever born. That night, after Anna had gone to sleep, he sat alone on the balcony. The city lights stretched endlessly before him, but his thoughts were far behind, buried in years he had tried to forget. He remembered a woman named Amelia working quietly in his old office, her kindness unnoticed amid the noise of ambition. He remembered her resignation letter and the emptiness that followed. He whispered her name into the night. Amelia Rivers. The sound of it brought both peace and pain. Inside, Anna stirred in her sleep, murmuring softly, "Do not go, Daddy." Charles froze. The word hung in the air like a spark that would not fade. He stood at the doorway, staring at her small figure beneath the blanket. His chest tightened, and his eyes stung with something he had not felt in years. In that fragile silence, he understood what his heart had already accepted. This was not coincidence. This was not charity. This was something far deeper, a connection written long before either of them realized it. And though the truth still waited in the shadows, Charles Denham knew that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. The following week brought sunlight after many days of rain. The air was clear, and from the balcony of his penthouse, Charles Denham could see the city stretched out like a painting below him. Anna had already eaten breakfast and was sitting cross-legged on the floor, drawing in her small notebook. The pages were filled with bright colors, buildings, clouds, and people holding hands. Charles watched her quietly from across the room. He had learned that her mornings began with drawing, and her nights ended with stories. He had also learned that silence no longer felt empty when she was near. She looked up suddenly, noticing his gaze. "Mr. Denham, do you work in one of those shiny buildings out there?" she asked, pointing out the window. He nodded. "Yes, I do. That is where I spend most of my days." "Do they let kids visit?" she asked. He smiled. "Sometimes. Why?" "I just want to see what a big office looks like," she said. "Maybe I could draw it." Her curiosity made him laugh softly. "We will see what we can arrange." Later that afternoon, he received a call from the hospital. Amelia Rivers was recovering well and would be released in 2 days. The nurse said she had been asking about Anna constantly. Charles promised he would bring Anna to visit the next morning. That evening, he drove Anna to a small park near the hospital to let her play before visiting hours began. The grass still glistened from the earlier rain, and sunlight streamed through the leaves. Anna ran along the path, chasing the shadows of birds that swooped overhead. "Do you know what this place needs?" she said, twirling in a circle. "A fountain with lights. Then it would look like magic." Charles smiled. "Maybe I can talk to someone about that." "You can do that?" she asked, eyes wide. He nodded. "Sometimes it helps to know people who can make small magic happen." She grinned and picked a daisy from the grass, holding it out to him. "Then you should have this. It is for people who make things better." 1. He accepted the flower carefully, tucking it into his jacket pocket. "Thank you, Anna. I will keep it." The following morning, they went to Street Marks Hospital. When Amelia saw them, her face lit up. "My sweetheart," she whispered as Anna climbed into her arms. "I missed you so much." Anna clung to her mother. "I missed you too. But Mr. Denham took care of me. He made warm milk and told me stories about the stars." Amelia looked at Charles, emotion filling her eyes. "You have done more than I could ever repay." He shook his head gently. "You do not owe me anything. I am just glad you are safe." The nurse entered with discharge papers. "Mrs. Rivers, you can go home tomorrow. The doctor wants you to rest for a week before returning to work." Amelia nodded in relief. "Thank you." As they left the hospital later that day, Charles suggested that Anna return to school the following week. "You have missed some days," he said kindly. "We do not want you to fall behind." Anna looked up at him. "But my old school is far away." "I know," he said. "I made some arrangements. There is a small school just across from the Taylor building. You can start there. Everything is already taken care of." She looked astonished. "Really? I can go there?" He smiled. "Yes, and you should know something else." He reached into his pocket and handed her a small envelope. Inside was a letter that said, "Scholarship recipient, anonymous sponsor." She frowned slightly. "What does that mean?" "It means someone believes in you," he said softly. "Someone who thinks you deserve every chance to learn and grow." She looked down at the paper, her small fingers tracing the words. "Who did this for me?" He hesitated, watching the sunlight catch the edge of her hair. "Someone who wants to stay quiet about it. Sometimes kindness does not need a name." Anna smiled, satisfied with the answer. "Then I will make them proud. I will study hard." I am sure you will," he said. That night, Amelia sat by the window of the apartment, her hands folded around a cup of tea. "I do not know how to thank you for all this," she said quietly. "The apartment, the school, everything. You have changed our lives." Charles shook his head. "You and Anna did that yourselves. I just opened a few doors." Amelia looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "You remind me of someone I used to know," she said softly. "Someone who cared once, even if he could not stay." Charles felt the words sink deep. He wanted to speak, to tell her everything that had been growing inside him, but he stopped himself. The time was not right. Instead, he said, "When Anna is ready for her first day of school, I will make sure she has everything she needs." Amelia smiled faintly. "She already does. She has people who see her." The next morning came bright and clear. Anna stood in her new school uniform, holding her backpack proudly. "Do you think Mama will like my picture when I draw the building?" she asked. "I think she will love it," Charles said. She slipped her hand into his as they crossed the street toward the school. Other parents walked with their children, chatting and laughing. For a fleeting moment, It looked as if they were no different from any of them, a man and a child beginning an ordinary day. When they reached the school gate, Anna turned and smiled up at him. "Thank you for not forgetting me," she said softly. He felt something warm rise in his chest. "I could never forget you, Anna." As she ran toward her classroom, her small figure bathed in morning light, Charles Denham stood still for a long time, realizing that for the first time in years, he was not thinking about business or loss. He was thinking about hope. The week passed quickly, and life began to find its rhythm again. Amelia continued to recover at home, gaining strength each day. Anna woke up early every morning, put on her new school uniform, and waited eagerly by the door for Charles to walk her to school. Their routine had become something quietly precious: shared breakfasts, short walks through the morning light, and laughter that filled the silence that once surrounded his days. But the world beyond their small circle had started to notice. One Thursday morning, as they stepped out of the Taylor building, a man with a camera stood near the curb. He appeared to be photographing the building for a business article. But when Anna ran up beside Charles and took his hand, the man's lens shifted. There was a quick flash, then another. Charles noticed but said nothing, assuming it was harmless. At the school gate, Anna turned and waved. "You will come to pick me up, right?" she said. He smiled. "Of course. I will be right here." She grinned and ran toward her classroom, her backpack bouncing with every step. That afternoon, as promised, he returned. She ran to him, proudly showing a gold sticker on her assignment sheet. "The teacher said I read the best today," she said excitedly. He congratulated her and handed her a small cupcake he had bought from the cafe near his office. "A reward," he said warmly. Anna's eyes lit up. "For me? Thank you, Mr. Denham." They walked together back toward the Taylor building. Neither of them noticed that another photographer across the street had quietly raised his camera. By the next morning, the picture was everywhere. It appeared first on a local business blog with the caption, "CEO Charles Denham seen walking hand in hand with young girl near Taylor building. Mystery family connection?" By noon, larger media outlets had picked it up. The headline on one financial site read, "From boardroom to playground, who is the little girl seen with billionaire Charles Denham?" In his office, Charles sat at his desk staring at the article on his computer screen. The photograph showed him kneeling to hand Anna the cupcake, her smile wide, his expression soft. To anyone else, it looked like a father and daughter. Marian entered hesitantly, a printout in her hand. "Sir, it is spreading quickly. The board has already seen it. Some are concerned about the publicity." He exhaled slowly, his jaw tightening. "What are they saying?" "They want to know who she is," she said carefully. "They are worried about rumors. Some think it might be a publicity stunt. Others think it could hurt the company's image." Charles looked away from the screen. "I will address it myself," he said. "For now, do not make any statement." That evening, when he arrived at the apartment, Amelia was standing by the window, holding the same newspaper. Her face was pale but composed. "I saw the photo," she said quietly. "It is in every shop window on our street." He nodded. "I am sorry, Amelia. I did not expect this. We did nothing wrong, but people will twist whatever they can." She folded the paper and set it aside. "They are saying terrible things, Charles. They are saying you are trying to hide something." He met her eyes, his voice calm but firm. "I am not hiding anything. I only wanted to help." Anna came out from her room, holding a drawing in her hand. "Mama, why are there pictures of me on the news?" Amelia forced a smile. "It is just a mistake, sweetheart." Charles knelt down so that he was eye level with her. "You did nothing wrong, Anna. Sometimes people take pictures without asking. It is not fair, but it happens." She frowned. "They make you look sad." He smiled faintly. "Then they are wrong, because you make me happy." Amelia placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "Go wash up, darling. Dinner is almost ready." When Anna left the room, Amelia turned back to Charles. "The board will not let this go, will they?" "No," he admitted. "They will want answers, but they will not get the truth from gossip." She crossed her arms, looking both angry and hurt. "And what is the truth, Charles? That you helped a woman and her child because of kindness, or because of something else?" He hesitated, the words caught between honesty and fear. I do not know anymore, he said quietly. But I know this, what I feel when I look at her, when I hear her laugh, is not just duty. It is something I cannot explain yet. Amelia turned away, her voice trembling. People will never understand that. They will destroy what little peace we have. He stepped closer but did not touch her. Then let them talk. The truth will stand on its own. The next day, as he entered the company's main office, whispers followed him down the hallway. A few colleagues offered polite smiles. Others avoided his eyes. At the board meeting, one of the senior partners slid a copy of the article across the table. Charles, he said, you need to make a statement. Investors are asking questions. Charles looked at the picture again. Anna's smile stared back at him, bright and innocent. I will speak publicly if I must, he said firmly. But I will not apologize for caring about a child. The room fell silent. That night, as he returned home, the city lights shimmered like reflections on water. When he stepped into the apartment, Anna was already asleep, clutching her stuffed bear. Amelia sat nearby, reading quietly. She looked up when he entered. Did they make it hard for you? She asked. He shook his head. Not harder than what you have endured. She studied him for a long moment, then said softly, You should be careful, Charles. The world can be cruel to men who show kindness. He looked at her, tired but resolute. Then let them be cruel, he said. I have lived long enough in a world without kindness. As he turned off the lights, the paper on the table caught the glow from the lamp. The headline still asked, Who is the little girl? But to Charles Denham, there was no question left. He already knew who she was, he just did not have the courage to say it out loud yet. The following morning, the city was already awake before Charles Denham stepped out of his car. The air felt heavier than usual, as though the headlines themselves hung in the clouds above the tall glass buildings. Every newsstand he passed displayed the same image, his hand holding that of a little girl. The captions varied, but the tone was the same: curiosity, speculation, and judgment. Inside the Denham Group's headquarters, the atmosphere was tense. The receptionist's greeting was hesitant, and even the security guards avoided his gaze. Charles walked straight to the elevator, ignoring the whispers that followed him. When he reached the top floor, his assistant, Marion, was waiting. Sir, she said carefully, the board has called for an emergency meeting in 30 minutes. They want you to address the situation before it escalates. He nodded once. Prepare the conference room. No press allowed. As he stepped into his office, the silence pressed against him. The seashell Anna had given him sat on the edge of his desk, next to the small daisy she had picked for him. The two small gifts looked fragile against the cold expanse of marble and steel. For a moment, he considered putting them away, but instead he left them there. When the meeting began, the room was filled with the low hum of tension. 12 board members sat around the long table, their faces drawn tight with concern. One of them, a man named Preston, leaned forward. Charles, this story has spread beyond local media. It is now on national outlets. People are questioning your judgment. They want to know who this girl is and why you have been photographed with her repeatedly. Another member added sharply, If this were a simple act of charity, you should have made a statement from the beginning. The longer you remain silent, the worse it looks. Charles folded his hands on the table. You are asking for a statement that I am not prepared to make yet, he said evenly. I helped a child and her mother. That is all the public needs to know. Preston's tone grew colder. Your silence suggests otherwise. The shareholders are anxious. They fear scandal. You need to protect this company's image. And Charles looked at the faces around him, men and women who had stood by him for years, not out of loyalty, but out of profit. He took a deep breath. You talk about image as if it is worth more than truth, he said quietly. I built this company on integrity. I will not lie to save it now. The room fell silent. Preston glanced at the others, then back at Charles. If you do not issue a clarification by the end of the day, the board will have to consider your position. Charles rose slowly, his voice steady. You may consider whatever you need to, but I will not feed gossip with half-truths. My conscience is clear. He left the room before they could reply. The doors closed behind him with a soft click that sounded more final than he expected. That evening, As he returned to the Taylor building, the hallway lights flickered faintly. He could hear faint laughter behind the apartment door, the sound of Amelia and Anna. It was the only thing that softened the weight he carried from that day. Inside, Anna ran up to him the moment he entered. "You are late," she said, smiling. "We saved you some soup." He smiled tiredly. "Then I am the lucky one." Amelia studied his face as he hung up his coat. "Rough day?" "You could say that," he replied quietly. She nodded. "It is all over the news again. People never seem to tire of talking about others." He sighed. "I tried to explain nothing because nothing wrong was done, but silence has its own price." Amelia poured him a bowl of soup. "You do not have to protect us, Charles. We can disappear if that will help you." He looked up sharply. "No, you will not disappear again." His voice softened. "I cannot let that happen." Anna watched the exchange quietly, sensing the tension even if she did not understand it. She reached into her small backpack and pulled out a folded paper bracelet. "I made another one," she said shyly. "It says, 'Do not be sad.' You can keep it on your desk so you remember to smile." Charles took it gently, his throat tightening. "Thank you, Anna. I will." The next morning, his company's communications director sent him a draft for a press release. It was filled with formal phrases about misunderstanding, corporate responsibility, and mentorship programs. Charles read it twice and deleted it without hesitation. Instead, he wrote a short note and placed it in an envelope addressed to the board. It contained only one sentence: "A man does not need permission to be kind." He left the office early that day. When he reached the apartment, Amelia was waiting with worry in her eyes. "What will you do now?" she asked. "I do not know," he said honestly. "Maybe it is time to remember why I started all of this in the first place." Anna came running from her room, holding her drawing. "Look," she said proudly. "It is you, Mama, and me, and this is our home in the clouds." He smiled, kneeling beside her. "It is perfect." As the evening light faded, Amelia sat quietly, watching him help Anna arrange her crayons. There was something in his gentleness that made her heart ache. "You really care for her, do you not?" she asked softly. He looked up. "More than I can explain." Later that night, after Anna had fallen asleep, Amelia found the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her. "Charles, are you sure this will not destroy everything you have built?" He turned toward her, his expression calm. "If what I built cannot survive truth or compassion, then maybe it was never worth keeping." The room fell into a peaceful silence. Outside, the city lights shimmered across the glass like stars scattered over water. For the first time, Charles Denham felt a strange kind of peace, the peace that comes not from control, but from finally choosing what matters most. In the stillness, he glanced at the paper bracelet beside the seashell on the table. The words, "Do not be sad," glowed faintly under the lamp, and though the world outside continued to whisper, inside that small apartment, everything felt quiet, safe, and right. The next few days passed in quiet uncertainty. The news stories began to fade from the front pages, but the tension inside the company did not. Charles Denham continued to work from his office, though the air felt different now, thick with unspoken questions. Even the sound of his shoes against the marble floors seemed louder than usual. Marian entered his office one afternoon with a hesitant expression. "Sir," she began carefully, "someone from Human Resources brought me an old personnel file. It was from more than 8 years ago. It belongs to a former employee, Amelia Rivers. They said it was flagged during an audit." Charles froze. The name hit him like a quiet blow. "What about it?" he asked, though his voice came out softer than he intended. Marian placed the folder on his desk. "There is a letter inside. It was never processed. It is marked confidential. I thought you might want to see it yourself before it is filed away again." When she left, the office door closed behind her with a gentle click. Charles sat staring at the folder for several long moments before finally opening it. Inside, he found old forms, payroll sheets, and at the very bottom a letter written in neat, careful handwriting. He unfolded it slowly. The paper had yellowed slightly with time, but the ink was still dark and clear. "To Mr. Denham, if you are reading this, it means I have already resigned. I wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to work here. I learned much during my time, even if I left quietly. I do not expect you to remember me, But there is one thing I hope you will understand one day. I did not leave because I wanted to. I left because I had to. Life has its own plans, and I was afraid to face them alone. Please do not think badly of me. You once told me that every person deserves a chance to start over. I took those words with me, and I hope you still believe them. If you ever wonder what became of me, know that I am still trying to build a life where kindness matters. Sincerely, Amelia Rivers. Charles sat still, the letter trembling faintly in his hand. He read it again, slower this time, as if searching for something between the lines. The date at the bottom confirmed what his heart had already begun to suspect. It was written around the same time she had left without a word. Around the same time he had felt the quiet loss of something he could not explain. He leaned back in his chair and stared out the window. The city stretched endlessly before him, bright and distant. His mind replayed the first time Anna had spoken to him, the way she had said, "I just want to know what it feels like to have a dad." Every detail now connected like pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered for years. That afternoon, he called a private investigator not for scandal, but for truth. "Find any record of a birth certificate for a child named Anna Rivers," he said quietly. "Born 7 years ago. The mother's name is Amelia." The man agreed, promising discretion. 2 days later, as the sun set behind the skyline, the investigator returned with a sealed envelope. Charles opened it with steady hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a copy of a hospital record. He read the words slowly, his heart pounding louder with every line. Child, Anna Rivers. Mother, Amelia Rivers. Father, name not listed. He stared at the empty space where his name could have been. His breath caught as he turned over the next document, a copy of an unverified DNA test filed years earlier but never completed. The test listed only the mother's name and a pending signature for the father's sample. His own initials were printed faintly beside it, marked incomplete. Charles felt the weight of years settle over him. Memories rushed in a quiet dinner with Amelia after a long meeting, the way she had smiled when he said she deserved more than the world was giving her, the night she had left without explanation. And then, years later, a little girl standing before him with a paper bracelet that said, "Happy birthday, Dad." He set the papers down and rubbed his temples. The truth was there, undeniable and merciless. Anna was his daughter. For a long time he sat in silence, unable to move. The thought brought equal parts joy and sorrow. Joy because he had found something he had not known he was missing. Sorrow because he had not been there when she needed him most. When he finally stood, he took the documents and placed them in a drawer. He needed time to think, time to decide how to face the truth. That evening, he went to the apartment. Amelia greeted him at the door, smiling faintly. "You look tired," she said softly. "Was it a hard day?" He nodded, forcing a small smile. "You could say that." Anna ran from her room and hugged his leg. "Mr. Denham, I made another drawing. It is all of us, Mama, me, and you. We are standing under a big tree." He looked at the picture. In the center was a tall man with brown hair and kind eyes. On either side of him were 2 smiling figures, a woman and a little girl. Above them, written in bright letters, was one word, family. He felt his throat tighten. "It is beautiful," he said quietly. "You have a real gift." She grinned. "It is going on the fridge." Amelia laughed softly, hanging it beside the others. When she turned, she noticed something in his eyes, something deeper, heavier than fatigue. "Charles, is something wrong?" she asked. He hesitated for a long moment. "Not wrong," he said at last. "Just something I should have known a long time ago." "Oh." That night, after they had both gone to sleep, Charles stood by the window looking out at the city lights. He held the copy of the hospital record in his hand, the one that left his name blank. Slowly, he whispered into the dark, "I am here now, Anna. I promise I will never leave again." For the first time in years, the silence around him felt different, no longer empty, but waiting for something new to begin. The following morning came quietly. The sky above the city was pale gray, and a fine mist hung in the air like unfinished thoughts. Charles Denham had barely slept. The papers in his drawer, the letter, the hospital record, and the incomplete DNA test had kept him awake through the night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the empty space beside the word, "Father." That blank line seemed to stare back at him, accusing and unfinished. He arrived at the office early, long before the rest of the staff. The building felt colder than usual, the air still and heavy. He stood by the tall window, holding his cup of coffee, and watched the traffic move below. For years, the city had been a symbol of his success, each tower a reflection of his ambition. Now it only felt distant. He knew what he had to do. After a long silence, he picked up his phone and called the private laboratory listed on the old report. A calm voice answered, "Denham Medical Diagnostics. How may I help you?" "This is Charles Denham," he said steadily. "I would like to update a file from several years ago. There was a DNA test under the name Amelia Rivers. It was never completed." The woman on the other end hesitated for a moment. "Yes, Mr. Denham, I can see that record. What would you like us to do?" "I would like to finish it," he said. "I will send my sample today." "Understood, sir. We will arrange a courier immediately." When he hung up, he sat back in his chair and exhaled slowly. The decision felt heavy, but for the first time in days, his thoughts were clear. That afternoon, he returned to the Taylor building. Anna ran to him as soon as he entered the apartment, holding a paper flower she had made in class. "I made this for you," she said proudly. "The teacher said to give it to someone who makes you feel safe." He knelt down, taking the fragile flower with careful hands. "Then I am very honored," he said softly. Amelia smiled from the kitchen, though her eyes carried a hint of worry. She had sensed the distance in him lately, the quiet weight that followed him like a shadow. "You look tired again," she said gently. "You have been working too hard." "Maybe," he said, forcing a smile, "but some work is worth the effort." That evening, after dinner, when Anna had gone to her room to draw, Charles stood by the window while Amelia washed the dishes. The sound of water filled the silence between them. Finally, he said quietly, "Amelia, may I ask you something?" She turned, drying her hands. "Of course. When you left the company years ago," he began carefully, "why did you not tell me the real reason?" Her expression froze. "What do you mean?" "I found your letter," he said softly. "The one you wrote when you resigned." She looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought you would forget me. You had your own world, and I did not belong to it." He stepped closer. "You should have told me, Amelia. I would have helped." She shook her head slowly. "Help was not what I needed. I needed space to protect something that was mine." He could hear the tremor in her voice, the weight of old fear and pride. He hesitated, then asked the question that had haunted him for days. "Anna, she was born 7 years ago. Is she?" Amelia's eyes filled with tears, though she did not look away. "Yes," she said finally. "She is yours." The truth hung between them like a living thing. The room seemed to grow still. Outside, the faint hum of traffic faded into silence. Charles felt a wave of emotion rise inside him, shock, sorrow, relief, and something far deeper. "All these years," he whispered, "you raised her alone." Amelia nodded, wiping her eyes. "I did not want her to grow up in the shadow of money or headlines. I wanted her to know love first, not status. I was afraid of what your world might take from her." He reached out, his voice breaking slightly. "You were wrong about one thing. You never left my world. I just did not know how to find you." She looked at him for a long moment, her defenses softening. "What will you do now?" He took a slow breath. "What I should have done years ago. I will protect her, and you." Amelia's voice trembled. "People will talk again, Charles. They always do." He nodded. "Let them. I am done living for their approval." Later that night, after Amelia had gone to bed, he sat alone at the table. The courier had already come earlier that day to collect his DNA sample. The test would take only a short while, but he no longer needed it to tell him what he already knew. Still, he wanted the truth written, sealed, and undeniable. As he looked around the small apartment, his eyes fell on Anna's paper flower resting beside the seashell and the daisy. 3 simple objects, each one a piece of the life he had almost missed. When Anna stirred in her sleep, he went quietly to her door and watched her for a moment. She slept peacefully, one arm around her stuffed bear, her face calm and untroubled. In the dim light, she looked so much like Amelia that his chest ached. He whispered, I am sorry I was not there when you were born, but I am here now. The next morning, his phone rang just as the first light touched the windows. It was the lab technician. Mr. Denham, the voice said, we have your results. Charles held his breath, and there was a pause. Then the reply came, steady and clear. The test confirms a biological match of 99.8%. Ugh. He closed his eyes, letting the words sink in. There was no shock this time, only a deep, quiet peace. After a long silence, he whispered, "Thank you." When he ended the call, he stood at the window watching the city awaken. For the first time in years, the future did not seem cold or empty. It was full of light, full of possibility, full of the laughter of a little girl who had unknowingly brought him home. The morning sun rose over the city like a soft promise. Its light slipped between the tall buildings and poured through the windows of the Taylor building, casting golden streaks across the walls of the small apartment. Amelia stood in the kitchen, stirring coffee slowly, her thoughts far away. The air was still, yet full of something she could not name, something between fear and hope. Charles Denham had not returned home the previous night after the call from the laboratory. She did not know where he had gone, but she knew he was facing something enormous, something that would change everything for all of them. When the door finally opened, Anna looked up from the table, her crayons scattered beside her drawings. "Mr. Denham," she said brightly, "I made you another picture. It is a sunrise, because you said mornings mean new beginnings." He smiled softly and bent down to take the drawing. "It is beautiful, Anna," he said. His voice was calm, but Amelia could see the weight behind his eyes. She turned from the stove, her hands trembling slightly. "Did you not sleep at all?" "No," he admitted. "There was something I needed to finish." She studied him carefully, sensing what he was about to say. "And now?" she asked quietly. He placed a small envelope on the table. "Now I know the truth. The test came back this morning. It confirmed what my heart already knew." Amelia froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The ticking of the clock on the wall filled the silence between them. Charles continued softly, "Anna is my daughter." Anna, who had been drawing happily, looked up in surprise. "What does that mean?" she asked innocently. Amelia knelt beside her, her voice trembling. "It means that Mr. Denham is not just our friend, sweetheart. He is your father." Anna blinked, the meaning slowly forming in her small mind. "My dad?" she whispered. "For real?" Charles nodded, his eyes shining with emotion. "For real, Anna, you are my daughter." There was a long silence, and then Anna stood up suddenly and ran to him, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "I knew it," she said softly. "I knew it when you smiled at me the first day. You looked like someone I already loved." Charles held her close, his eyes closing as he breathed in the moment. For the first time in years, he felt complete. "I am so sorry I was not there for you sooner," he whispered. Anna shook her head against his shoulder. "You are here now. That is what matters." Amelia stood watching, tears streaming down her cheeks. The sight before her was both beautiful and painful, a piece of the past coming full circle. When Anna went back to her room to put away her drawings, Amelia turned to Charles. "You should be angry," she said quietly. "I kept her from you all these years." He shook his head slowly. "I was angry once, at the world, at myself, but not now. You did what you thought was right. You protected her." Amelia's voice cracked. "I was scared. You were powerful, busy, surrounded by people who judged. I thought you would not want the weight of us." He stepped closer, his voice soft but certain. "You were never a weight. You were the piece I did not know I was missing." For a long time, neither spoke. The morning light filled the room with a quiet, golden peace. Later that afternoon, Charles took them both for a walk through the city park. The trees were beginning to shed their first autumn leaves, and the air was cool and clear. Anna skipped ahead, chasing after a pigeon, her laughter echoing through the open space. Amelia walked beside Charles in silence until she finally said, "What happens now?" He thought for a moment before answering. "Now, I tell the truth. To the board, to the press, to everyone who matters. I will not hide her or you. People can say what they want, but I will not live in fear anymore." Amelia looked up at him, startled. "Are you sure? The company might not forgive that." He smiled faintly. Then they can take the company. What good is power if it costs me the chance to be a father? Amelia's eyes softened. You sound different than the man I used to know. Maybe I finally became the man I was supposed to be, he said quietly. That evening, back at the apartment, Anna sat on the floor building a small castle out of cardboard boxes. She looked up suddenly and said, Mama, do you think Daddy can come to my school tomorrow? We are having a family day. Amelia hesitated, then looked at Charles. That might not be a good idea right now, she began. But Charles interrupted gently. If she wants me there, I will be there. Anna's face lit up with pure joy. Really? Really, he said. You can count on that. That night, after Anna had fallen asleep, Amelia and Charles sat together by the window. The city below sparkled like scattered diamonds, and the hum of distant traffic filled the air. You know they will not stop talking, Amelia said softly. They will take pictures again. They will write more stories. I know, he replied. But this time, I will give them the truth. I will not let rumors tell our story. She looked at him for a long moment, her voice barely a whisper. And what is our story, Charles? He turned toward her, his eyes steady. It is a story about a man who lost his way, and a child who led him home. A faint smile touched her lips. Then it is a good story. He nodded. It is the only one that matters. As the night deepened, Charles glanced once more toward the small bedroom where Anna slept peacefully. For the first time in his life, he did not feel like the richest man in the city. He felt like the luckiest father in the world. The truth that had once terrified him now felt like freedom. The blank space beside the word father had finally been filled not with ink, but with love. The morning of the family event at Anna's school arrived with sunlight spilling softly through the window blinds. The air carried that crisp sweetness that only autumn could bring. Amelia stood by the kitchen counter, carefully braiding Anna's hair while the little girl hummed a tune she had learned in class. Charles sat at the table, drinking his coffee and watching them. There was peace in the simple rhythm of that morning, the kind of peace he had not known existed before this small apartment, before this small child. Anna turned to him with a wide smile. Daddy, are you sure you can come today? She asked, her voice full of excitement and a little disbelief. He smiled back at her, the word daddy still new on his ears but already carved into his heart. I promised, did I not? He said gently. I always keep my promises. Amelia looked up from tying the ribbon in Anna's hair. We do not have to make a big scene, she said softly. You can just sit with the other parents. She will be happy just knowing you are there. Charles nodded. That is exactly what I plan to do. When they arrived at the school later that morning, the small playground was already filled with families. Children ran between tables, showing off their crafts, while parents chatted with one another. Some teachers recognized Charles immediately, their polite smiles shifting into subtle whispers. He ignored them, focusing on Anna, who was proudly leading him toward her classroom. This is my desk, she said proudly. And that is my drawing wall. Look, I drew all of us. On the wall, beneath a banner that read Family Day, was a crayon drawing of 3 smiling figures holding hands beneath a large tree. Above them, in uneven handwriting, were the words, my family, Mama, Daddy, and me. Charles stared at it for a moment, his throat tightening. It is perfect, he said softly. You are quite the artist. Anna grinned. The teacher said I have a good imagination. I told her my daddy is real, not imaginary. He laughed quietly, the sound warm and unguarded. A teacher approached and smiled politely. You must be Anna's father, she said. She talks about you all the time. He nodded. Yes, I am. As the morning went on, the children sang songs and performed small skits. Anna stood in the front row, her voice clear and full of joy. When her eyes found Charles in the crowd, she smiled so brightly that he felt something in his chest shift a deep, quiet certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. After the event, families gathered for refreshments in the courtyard. A few parents approached Charles, some curious, some cautious. One man extended a hand. You are Charles Denham, right? From Denham Group? Yes, Charles said calmly, shaking his hand. The man smiled. I read about you in the papers last week. I guess the rumors were true. Amelia stiffened beside him, but Charles only replied evenly. If the rumor is that I have a daughter, then yes, it is true. and it is the best truth I have ever known." The man nodded awkwardly and stepped back. Others exchanged glances but said nothing more. The moment passed quickly, and Anna tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, can we go get ice cream?" He smiled down at her. "Yes, we can. Let us go." They walked together to a small ice cream stand near the park. The afternoon sun glowed warmly against the buildings, and the world felt softer than usual. Anna licked her cone happily while Charles watched her, memorizing every expression, the joy, the innocence, the unguarded wonder that seemed to fill the air around her. Amelia sat quietly on the bench beside him, her eyes following their daughter. "She looks happy," she said. "She is," he replied, "and so am I." For a while, they said nothing. The quiet between them was comfortable, a kind of understanding that needed no words. Then Amelia spoke softly, almost hesitantly. "You are brave, you know, to face the world like that today." He smiled faintly. "I am not brave. I am just done pretending that love is something to be hidden." She looked at him for a long moment. "They will keep talking, Charles. People always do." "Let them talk," he said. "Let them write whatever they want. For once, the truth is on my side." Later that evening, when they returned home, Anna placed her ice cream stick into her small box of treasures. Inside were tiny objects she had collected: her seashell, a folded paper flower, a bracelet made of yarn, and now the wooden stick. "These are the things that make me happy," she said, "because they remind me of people I love." Charles smiled. "That is a very important box." Anna nodded seriously. "I think I will keep it forever." Amelia leaned against the doorframe, watching them. Her heart felt full and fragile all at once. "You make her world better," she said softly. Charles looked up at her, his voice low. "She made mine whole." That night, after Anna had fallen asleep, Charles stood by the window, looking out over the glittering city. "You know," he said quietly, "for most of my life, I thought success was measured in buildings, in profits, in the way people said my name, but none of it ever filled the emptiness." Amelia walked over and stood beside him. "And now?" He turned to her, his expression tender. "Now I know it is measured in laughter and drawings and small hands that trust mine. I do not need anything else." The lights of the city blinked softly, and the sound of the night breeze whispered through the half-open window. For the first time, Charles Denham did not feel like a man defending his reputation or rebuilding his empire. He felt like a father standing at the beginning of something true. And in that quiet apartment, surrounded by the hum of the city, he finally understood that family was not something earned, it was something found, cherished, and protected. Forever, the days that followed the school event passed more peacefully than anyone expected. The storm of gossip that had once surrounded Charles Denham began to fade. The headlines shifted to new stories, the curious whispers in his company grew quieter, and the city slowly forgot. But inside the small apartment on the 15th floor, life had begun to bloom into something new and full. Each morning, Charles drove Anna to school, making sure her backpack was zipped and her lunchbox was packed with her favorite apple slices. She always kissed Amelia goodbye before running toward the classroom doors, turning back just long enough to wave at both of them. It was a simple thing, yet every time she did it, Charles felt something indescribable move inside his chest, a mix of pride, peace, and disbelief that this little girl truly belonged to him. Amelia noticed the way he watched Anna. "You look at her like she is made of sunlight," she said one morning as they walked back from the school. He smiled quietly. "That is because she is," Amelia laughed softly. "You know, you are becoming a father faster than I ever imagined." Charles looked at her. "It does not take time to love someone. It only takes the moment you realize you should have loved them all along." That evening, after work, he brought home something unexpected. It was a small, upright piano, polished and simple, but beautiful. Amelia looked at it in surprise. "Charles, what is this?" He smiled. "You once said she loved to sing and wanted to learn to play. I thought we could make that happen here." When Anna came home and saw it, her eyes widened in wonder. "Is that for me?" she asked. "For us," he said, "but mostly for you." She ran her fingers across the keys, pressing one gently. The note rang out, clear and bright, echoing through the small apartment like laughter. "It sounds like magic," she whispered. Over the next few weeks, the piano became the center of their evenings. Charles would sit beside Anna, showing her where to place her fingers, while Amelia cooked or read by the window. Some nights, Anna would sing softly while playing a few uneven notes. The sound filled the space with warmth that no expensive home or grand office had ever known. One night, as Charles helped Anna with her music sheet, she looked up at him and asked, "Daddy, did you always want to have a daughter?" He paused, thinking carefully before answering. "I did not know I wanted one until I met you. And then I realized I had been waiting for you all along." Anna smiled sleepily. "I am glad you found me." "So am I," he said softly. That night, after she went to bed, Amelia joined him at the piano. "She has changed everything," she said quietly. He nodded. "She has changed me." Amelia hesitated, her voice uncertain. "Do you ever wish you had known sooner? That I had told you?" Charles was silent for a long time. Then he said, "If you had told me back then, I might not have understood. I was a different man. I might have turned this miracle into a negotiation, and that would have ruined everything. Maybe things happened the only way they could." Amelia looked at him, her eyes glistening. "You really believe that?" "Yes," he said. "Sometimes life hides its blessings until we are ready to see them." The next day, something unexpected happened. Marian, his assistant, visited the apartment. She stood at the door holding a sealed envelope. "Sir," she said respectfully, "the board has reviewed your recent statement to the press. They voted unanimously to retain you as CEO. They said your honesty did more good than harm. The public saw your humanity." Charles looked surprised but grateful. "Thank you, Marian." As she turned to leave, she smiled at Anna, who was sitting on the floor with her coloring book. "You must be the little girl who made our boss famous," she said kindly. Anna looked up with wide eyes. "Famous? Why?" Marian laughed softly. "Because he told the truth. That is rare in our world." After she left, Amelia handed him the envelope. "You see," she said, "you did not lose anything by being honest." He nodded. "No, I gained everything that mattered." That evening, the three of them walked to the park. The air was cool, and the first hints of winter touched the trees. Anna ran ahead, her laughter echoing between the tall lampposts. Charles and Amelia followed slowly, their shoulders brushing now and then. "She is growing fast," he said quietly. Amelia nodded. "Too fast. Soon she will want her own world, her own space." He smiled. "Then we will build it with her, one day at a time." They sat together on a bench, watching Anna chase the falling leaves. For a long while, neither spoke. The city lights flickered on in the distance, and the wind carried the faint sound of a street musician's saxophone. Amelia finally said, "You know, when I first met you, I thought you were unreachable. You were the man in the glass tower. I never imagined you sitting on a park bench, smiling at leaves." Charles laughed quietly. "Maybe I just needed the right reason to come down from the tower." She smiled, turning toward him. "And you found one." He looked at her, his expression soft and full of truth. "I found both." As night settled around them, Anna came running back, holding a handful of golden leaves. "Look," she said, out of breath. "They are hearts. The trees made hearts for us." Charles took one of the leaves from her hand and studied it in the glow of the streetlight. It was indeed shaped like a small heart, fragile and perfect. He smiled. "Then we should keep them," he said. "They will remind us that love can grow anywhere, even when we least expect it." And as he held Amelia's hand in one and Anna's in the other, the cold air no longer felt cold. The city around them seemed to pause, as if even the wind understood that something rare and beautiful had finally found its place. The first snow of the season began to fall the next morning. Thin white flakes drifted slowly past the tall glass windows of the Taylor building, melting against the warm air before they reached the ground. The city had taken on that quiet calm that only came in winter, where everything seemed softer, slower, and somehow more honest. Charles Denham stood by the window, watching the world outside turn white. Behind him, the faint sound of piano notes echoed through the small apartment. Anna was practicing her scales, her small fingers carefully pressing each key while Amelia followed the rhythm with a soft hum. The music was uneven but full of life, and it filled the space with a warmth no fireplace could ever match. He turned to look at them. Amelia's face was calm, lit by the soft glow of morning, and Anna's expression was serious with concentration. The sight of them together always struck him as both miraculous and familiar, as if he were seeing something he had once dreamed but never believed he would find again. When the song ended, Anna turned and grinned. "Did I play it right, Daddy?" she asked eagerly. He smiled. "You played it perfectly. Even the mistakes were beautiful." Amelia laughed softly. "That is one way to keep her encouraged." He walked over, kneeling beside the piano. "Every artist needs an audience that believes in her," he said. "And I happen to be yours." Anna threw her arms around him. "Then I will play every day." "That is a promise," he said, hugging her back. The peace of that morning felt almost sacred, but beneath it, Charles knew the world outside had not completely forgotten them. The media had begun to soften their tone, but whispers still followed him in the business world. People wanted to know more about the story of the billionaire and the child he had found. For weeks, he had refused all interviews, preferring the quiet truth of his new life to the noise of headlines. But one afternoon, an invitation arrived from a well-known journalist, a live charity broadcast to raise funds for children without homes. The letter was handwritten and respectful, asking him to appear not as a businessman, but as a father. He showed it to Amelia. She read it slowly, then looked up at him. "You are thinking of doing it, aren't you?" "Yes," he said quietly. "I think it is time to stop hiding from the world." Amelia frowned slightly. "You do not owe them an explanation." I know," he replied. "But if my story can help someone else believe that people can change, then maybe it is worth telling." She hesitated, then nodded. "If you do it, speak from your heart, not from your title." He smiled faintly. "That is the only way I know how now." A week later, the studio lights were bright, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and fresh paint. Charles sat across from the interviewer, calm but thoughtful. Behind the cameras, Amelia and Anna watched from a small corner, the little girl holding her mother's hand tightly. The host began with polite questions about his company, his work, and the recent challenges he had faced. Charles answered them briefly, but his eyes kept finding their way toward the corner where his family Saturday bike. Then the interviewer leaned forward and asked the question that the world had been whispering. "Mr. Denham, people were surprised to learn that the young girl seen with you is actually your daughter. How did that change your life?" Charles took a slow breath. The room grew quiet. "It changed everything," he said finally. "For years, I lived surrounded by success but completely alone. I thought happiness was built with walls of glass and steel. I was wrong. Happiness came to me in the form of a little girl who asked a stranger to be her father for one day. She gave me more than I ever gave her." The interviewer was silent for a moment. "And what would you say to those who still doubt your intentions?" Charles smiled softly. "I would tell them that love does not need defending. I would tell them that sometimes the greatest privilege a man can have is to be needed by a child." From the corner, Anna whispered to Amelia, "He sounds brave." Amelia squeezed her hand gently. "He is." When the interview ended, applause filled the studio. Reporters approached, but Charles waved them off politely. His focus was already on Anna, who ran to him the moment the cameras were turned off. "You did great, Daddy," she said, jumping into his arms. He laughed softly. "You watched the whole thing?" "All of it," she said proudly. "You talked about love. Mama said that was brave." He looked at Amelia, who smiled quietly. "She was right," Amelia said. "You were honest. The world needs that." In the days that followed, the response to the interview was overwhelming but different this time. Letters arrived, not of gossip or criticism, but of gratitude. Strangers wrote about their own families, about second chances, about hope. One message stood out to him. It came from a young man who had grown up in foster care. The letter read, "Your story made me believe that people can change. Maybe someone will want to be my father someday too." Charles read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it on his desk beside Anna's seashell and her paper bracelet. That evening, he came home to find Amelia and Anna decorating the small Christmas tree they had placed by the window. It was their first one together. Anna was standing on a chair, trying to reach the top. "Need help?" he asked. She turned and grinned. "You are tall enough. You can put the star." Ugh. He took the small gold star from her hand and placed it gently at the top of the tree. The lights flickered on, bathing the room in a soft, golden glow. "Perfect," Amelia said softly. Charles stood back, watching them, his heart full. "No," he said quietly. "This time, perfect is not about how things look. It is about who is standing beside you." Amelia looked at him, her eyes warm. "Then we are perfect." Anna clapped her hands and nodded. "We are." Ugh. As the snow fell heavier outside, their laughter filled the room. For the first time in his life, Charles Denham did not feel like he was building an empire. He was building a home. And that, he finally understood, was the greatest legacy a man could ever leave behind. Winter deepened over the city, and with it came a quiet sense of wonder that touched everything it fell upon. The streets sparkled with frost, store windows shimmered with lights, and the sound of bells echoed faintly through the crisp air. In the small apartment on the 15th floor, warmth filled every corner. The smell of cinnamon and cocoa drifted from the kitchen, and laughter from a little girl made the place feel more alive than any grand house could. Charles Denham had taken time off from his company for the first time in many years. His assistant, Marion, had insisted that he rest after the whirlwind of media attention and public appearances. Now, instead of board meetings and conference calls, his days were filled with something far more meaningful, helping Anna build snowmen, baking cookies with Amelia, and discovering what real life outside of ambition truly felt like. On one of those cold December mornings, Anna burst into the living room, bundled up in a puffy red coat and woolen hat. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement. "Daddy, the school is having a winter festival today. You have to come. There will be music and games and hot chocolate." Charles smiled at her energy. "I would not miss it for anything," he said, fastening her scarf. Amelia appeared with her gloves in hand, shaking her head with amusement. "She has been talking about this festival all week," she said. "I think she is more excited about the snowball contest than the music." Anna grinned proudly. "Because I am going to win." The three of them walked to the school together, the snow crunching beneath their boots. The morning sunlight glittered across the white rooftops, and the whole city seemed dressed for joy. When they arrived, the schoolyard was filled with families, children running through the snow, and teachers arranging tables covered with cookies and hot drinks. Charles stood quietly for a moment, taking it all in. There had been a time when he would have watched such scenes from his car window, distant and untouched by the world around him. Now, he was in the middle of it, laughing, talking, and feeling the pulse of life he had once ignored. Anna ran toward the snowball area, calling, "Come on, Daddy." He followed her, laughing as she threw the first snowball. It hit his coat squarely. She gasped, pretending to be shocked by her own aim. "You are in trouble now," he said playfully, scooping up a handful of snow. Amelia watched from the sidelines, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. For a moment, she saw the man she had once known transformed, the sharp edges of his old self softened by love and laughter. It was a sight that made her heart ache and heal at the same time. When the snowball contest ended, Anna was crowned the winner of her age group. The teacher handed her a small medal shaped like a snowflake, and she ran straight into her father's arms. "I told you I would win," she said proudly. "You did," Charles said, lifting her high into the air. "And I have never been prouder." Later that afternoon, as the festival came to an end, the school principal approached Charles and Amelia. "Mr. Denham," she said kindly, "your daughter is quite remarkable. She speaks often about kindness and about how people can change. She must have learned that from you both." Amelia smiled modestly. "She teaches us more than we teach her." The principal nodded. "Then she is lucky to have such parents." Those words lingered in Charles's mind as they walked home. Parents. It was still strange to hear, yet it felt right. It felt like a title he had earned not through power or wealth, but through love and presence. That evening, the snow began to fall again, thicker this time. The city lights glowed softly beneath the white curtain. Amelia prepared dinner while Anna sat at the piano, playing the simple melody she had been practicing for weeks. Her voice rose gently as she sang, her tone pure and sweet. "Silent night, holy night, all is calm, all is bright." Charles stood in the doorway, watching her. Amelia joined him, wiping her hands on a towel. She has been rehearsing that song for the school concert, she whispered. She wanted to surprise you. When Anna finished, she turned with a shy smile. Did you like it? Charles knelt beside her, his eyes soft. It was beautiful, he said. You have a gift, Anna. She hugged him tightly. Mama says gifts are meant to be shared. Maybe I can sing at your company's Christmas party. He chuckled. I think everyone would love that. After dinner, they sat by the window watching the snow. Amelia poured hot cocoa into 3 mugs, the steam curling upward in the soft light. Anna leaned her head on her father's shoulder and whispered, Daddy, can we always stay like this, just happy, and together? Charles felt his throat tighten. Yes, he said softly. No matter what happens, we will always have each other. Amelia looked at him, her eyes reflecting both gratitude and understanding. You kept your promise, she said quietly. He smiled. I intend to keep it for the rest of my life. As night deepened, Anna fell asleep on the couch, her small hand still clutching the snowflake metal. Charles carried her gently to her room, tucking her under the blanket. When he returned, Amelia was standing by the window, gazing at the falling snow. She will remember this winter forever, she said. So will I, he replied. They stood together in silence for a moment, watching the snow swirl against the glass. Then, without words, she reached for his hand. He held it tightly, feeling the quiet pulse of everything that had brought them here, the pain, the forgiveness, the small miracles that had built this family. Outside, the city slept under a blanket of white. Inside, the warmth of love glowed steady and bright. And for Charles Denham, who had once thought he had everything, it was only now, in this fragile, perfect stillness, that he realized he finally did. The following morning, the snow had stopped falling, leaving the city wrapped in quiet white stillness. Sunlight glimmered off rooftops and frozen branches, turning everything into a world of light. Inside the apartment, the warmth of morning coffee mixed with the faint scent of pine from the small Christmas tree by the window. Charles Denham sat at the table, reading through the stack of letters that had arrived after his television interview. Many were from people he had never met, letters filled with gratitude, forgiveness, and hope. He had once been used to reports filled with numbers and profits. Now he was reading words written by people whose lives had been touched by his story. Each line reminded him how powerful simple truth could be. Amelia placed a plate of toast beside him. More letters? She asked gently. He nodded, setting one down. They come from all over the country. Some from people who felt forgotten, some from fathers who are trying to make things right. I never expected this. She smiled softly. Maybe they see what I saw a long time ago. That you are not as unreachable as you once pretended to be. Before he could answer, a small voice came from the hallway. Daddy, can we go outside? I want to see the big snow in the park before it melts. Anna stood there, bundled in her red coat again, her mittens slightly mismatched. Charles folded the letter and stood up, smiling. How can I say no to that? They spent the afternoon in the park, where the snow still lay thick and soft. Children laughed and shouted all around, and parents watched with steaming cups of coffee in their hands. Anna ran ahead, leaving a trail of tiny footprints behind her. Daddy, look, she called, pointing to a small hill. Let us slide down together. He followed her up the hill, the snow crunching beneath his boots. When they reached the top, she sat down on her sled, gripping the rope. Hold on tight, she said, giggling. He sat behind her, his arms steady around her small shoulders. Ready? Ready? They pushed off, gliding down the slope as laughter burst from both of them. The cold wind stung his face, but his heart felt light and warm. When they reached the bottom, Anna fell backward into the snow, laughing so hard she could barely breathe. Amelia stood nearby, watching them with a smile. You look like 2 children, she said teasingly when they returned. That is the point, Charles replied with a grin. She reminds me how to be one. As the afternoon sun began to fade, they walked home through streets lined with soft white drifts. The golden light turned the snow to silver, and the air was filled with the faint smell of chimney smoke. When they reached the apartment, Charles stopped for a moment before unlocking the door. He looked down at Anna and said quietly, Do you know what I used to wish for when I was your age? She shook her head. What? I wished for a family, he said. I used to think that if I worked hard enough, I could buy happiness, but I was wrong. Happiness is not something you buy, it is something you build, little by little, with the people you love. Anna smiled, her eyes bright. Then we built it together. He knelt down and hugged her tightly. Yes, we did. That evening, they ate dinner by the warm glow of the Christmas lights. Amelia poured hot chocolate for all of them, and the three sat together quietly, the sound of the city muffled by snow. Amelia looked around the small apartment, the piano, the drawings on the fridge, the paper snowflakes Anna had made, and whispered, "It is strange. The world thinks we changed your life, but really, you changed ours." Charles reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "Maybe we just saved each other," he said softly. Outside, the snow began to fall again, slow and gentle. Inside, the warmth of laughter and love filled the room. For the first time in many years, Charles Denham did not think about what tomorrow might bring. He only thought about this moment, simple, quiet, and real. It was the kind of moment that, once lost, could never be replaced, and he silently promised himself that he would never lose it again. The snow continued to fall through the night, blanketing the city in stillness. By morning, the streets were white and silent. The world slowed to a calm rhythm that felt almost sacred. Inside the small apartment, the smell of pancakes filled the air. Amelia hummed softly while Anna helped set the table, carefully arranging the forks as though they were made of gold. Charles watched them from the kitchen doorway, his heart full. He had once believed peace was something found in quiet offices or empty penthouses high above the city. Now he knew it was found here, in laughter that echoed between walls still warm from sleep. When they sat down together, Anna looked up from her plate. "Daddy, can we keep the tree up after Christmas?" she asked. "It feels like home when the lights are on." Charles smiled gently. "We can keep it as long as you want," he said. "Maybe forever." After breakfast, Amelia reached for her coat. "I need to stop by the laundry shop for a few hours," she said. "The owner asked if I could help with some extra orders before the holiday." Charles nodded. "I will take Anna to the park again. We will meet you for dinner." Anna's face brightened. "Can we bring the sled?" "Of course," he said. "It is our new tradition." Later, in the park, the wind was sharp, but the sun glowed warmly against the snow. Anna ran ahead, dragging her sled behind her, leaving tiny footprints in her path. Charles followed slowly, his gaze soft, as though memorizing every second. When they stopped to rest, Anna sat beside him on the bench, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She leaned against him and whispered, "Daddy, I used to make wishes on stars, but I do not have to anymore." He looked down at her. "Why not?" "Because my wish already came true," she said. "I asked for someone who would never stop loving me." His chest tightened with emotion. "Then I am the one who should be making wishes now," he said quietly. "Because you are the best thing that ever happened to me." As the sun dipped behind the buildings, they walked home hand in hand, their shadows stretching long across the snow. In that moment, Charles Denham realized that no matter what storms might come, he had already found the calm he had spent a lifetime searching for. He had found home. Evening settled gently over the city, painting the snow in soft shades of silver and gold. The lights from the buildings shimmered like stars that had come down to rest upon the earth. Inside the apartment, the small Christmas tree still glowed in the corner, its ornaments reflecting the warmth of the room. Amelia sat by the piano, quietly watching as Charles helped Anna hang one last paper ornament she had made that afternoon. It was a small heart cut from red construction paper, with the words "Our Family Forever" written in uneven letters. When they finished, Anna turned to them with a sleepy smile. "It is perfect," she said softly. "Now the tree knows our story too." Charles lifted her into his arms and kissed her forehead. "Our story is just beginning," he whispered, "and I promise I will be here for every page." Amelia smiled, her eyes shining. "You already are," she said gently. Later that night, after Anna had fallen asleep, Charles stood by the window, watching the snow fall over the quiet city. Amelia joined him, wrapping her arms around his waist. For a while, neither spoke. The silence between them was full of everything they had lost, everything they had found, and everything they were still becoming. Finally, Charles said softly, "I used to think redemption was something a man had to earn, but it is not. It is something given to you by the people brave enough to love you anyway." Amelia rested her head on his shoulder. And what do you think love is now? He looked out at the lights below, his voice steady. Love is coming home. She smiled, her eyes closing as she whispered, Then you are home, Charles. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the city in peace. Inside, the glow from the Christmas lights flickered across their faces. It was not the grand world he had once built, but it was real, and it was enough. And as Charles looked toward the small room where his daughter slept, he felt the quiet truth settle in his heart. The story that had begun with one little girl's wish had become the miracle that changed them all. For the first time in his life, Charles Denham no longer felt like the man who had everything. He felt like the man who finally had what truly mattered: love, forgiveness, and family. Forever.